This moment we share here right now, it is never actually built out of single ticks of the clock. While I am standing here before you, I took my recent past, the beautiful talk of Naomi, but also certainly my nerves from backstage to this moment in the here and now. I, of course, also have a reasonable expectation of what is about to happen in the next 17 minutes or so, and this expectation enables me to move from now to in a bit to in a bit. Even the much further future is with me here today, in this moment. The possible fame and fortune I might be getting from this TED Talk, or the lovely new encounter with someone out of the audience that I'm going to meet in the next couple of hours. And finally, I stand here with my whole life in memories and experiences. And this all is influencing the now that is projected onto me, and all these things are also influencing the now that is projected onto each one of you. In a famous conversation between Einstein, the physicist, and Henry Bergson, the philosopher, the same subject was on the table: time. In a time where clocks started to run on your arms, train stations started to display the same time nationwide, and people started to believe that literally everything could be solved in a calculator, Einstein was a firm believer of just that: time as ticks of a clock, something to calculate with. Bergson, on the other hand, contested this. How can this culmination of so many nows be only explained by ticks of the clock? He argued that to describe our human subjective experience of time, you need a whole new parameter to add to the equation, something he called durée. The short experience we just shared is about exactly that, about the battle between the clock time and the subjective time. We heard a system that is enabling me to create these time duplicates that fly through space and get transformed into light. The back end of this system shows much similarities to that of a clockwork, but it operates within the same rule set. But the way I can tweak and operate this clockwork enables me to get much other results than normal time. We get subjectiveness, we get distortion, and it becomes much more like our subjective experience of time. Imagine a song that is enabling you to experience haste, calm, and that triggers a childhood memory at the same time. Now you have 3 time zones culminating in one now just by listening to a song. I love how the previous 4-paragraph explanation is summarizable through an experience, and that is what I always do. I try to tell a story through an experience. You might see these flickering lights and hear these rattling sounds and think of them simply as something abstract. But I would say there is meaning to these lights. They are not as abstract as you might think. I myself always had a somewhat distorted relationship with time. I operate out of unrest, not out of rest. Unrest fuels my work, and it fuels actually my whole life ethic. It's not something I'm super proud of, by the way. But when looking back at my childhood memories, one thing stands out, and that is impatience. Similar tics, as we've just heard in the beginning of the talk, were also audible in my first ever bedroom, but they were not coming from a fancy time simulation system. No, they were coming from my own hands, trying to tap on every free surface that I could find in my bedroom. I wanted to research the timbres and the reverberations, yes, but I was mainly trying to cure my enduring impatience. No wonder my first instrument was playing the drums, and that was something I used to do relentlessly, until something happened. I know it doesn't sound sexy, but everything changed when I got to own a bank account. And that happened when I was 11 years old, and I got to choose between 2 packages: the football package and the Euro-style package. Bear with me, it was the 90s, and this card looked like this, but I loved it, and I hated football, so this was my choice. It wasn't the card that changed my life, though. It was the funky colored CD-ROM that came with it. And on this CD-ROM, there was a whole load of bullshit demo software, but one of the bullshit demos was an ancient version of EJ Music Maker. And with this software, you were able to drag and drop these clips onto a timeline, and they would all sound nice with each other. So I wouldn't say I learned much about music making, but I did learn that if you put 4 hours into this program instead of a rhythm, you could listen back to what you just made. In the same year, my father took me to see a life-changing performance of Moby. For those of you who know, it was in the year that he released his hit album, Play. And it was on a festival field full of 30,000 partygoers, and my father just took me to the front of the stage, and I was there in between his strong arms, and in his safety, I had only like the view of the stage, and I saw this bald guy jumping over the stage, and this was the first time that I heard these 808 basses flowing through my body, and at the time I was yay high, so they indeed came from subwoofers that were much larger than me. And these two happenings made me go into electronic music. I started playing it, I started living it, and I started making it. Except from making the music, nightlife experiences also taught me something else. With my mind always not in the now, I all of a sudden had these experiences in confined spaces called clubs, and you had this certain set of people and this certain set of tracks and these lights and this sound and the smoke, and you were just in this bubble for 8 hours with this group of people, and this now would never happen ever again in that fashion anymore. And I saw the beauty of that, but I was always thinking, like, what else could you do with this, with these media? What else could you do with these things, and how can you tell other stories with this? So I started seeing other narratives in club nights. I started experimenting a lot. I started building these complex systems, as I would call them, these instruments that at the same time enhance me, but also limit me greatly. So, for example, the ecosystem we just heard and that collapsed, it enhances me by letting me create something I wouldn't be able to create without the system, but it also limits me to this one thing that it's able to do, and this one story that you can tell with it. And I started creating all these different things, linear speaker arrays, and I started making works that would only use one color and one sound source, and then I created this. So this installation was quite a pivotal moment for me. After this installation, my life started running in a whole new pace. And time is always a big influence on my work, but it can also feel like a trap for me, but also my fellow makers. In fact, I think time is one of the scarcest things we have. You have it, you don't have it, and you rush through it. time stopped. The world stopped. My work stopped. We've just been listening to an annoying bird in my garden, my favorite JX3P synthesizer, and we've been watching the beautiful visuals of Vincent Rang. And this was the first project that I made in the time vacuum we call 2020. It was one of the first projects I made again in about 8 years that didn't involve a deadline or a commission. It was purely made out of necessity, and it really taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about listening again, and it taught me a lot about taking the time again to make a story. And like me, Vincent is also confined in this work to a small space, just an aquarium, paints and plants. And he is also limited to time, because he needs time to let this work progress. And as you just heard, you heard a field recording out of my garden with this annoying bird in it. And this project introduced a theme in my work that wasn't there for a while, and that was field recording. Field recording is like photographing the world, but then not with a camera, but with a microphone. I love when you put a microphone on something, it becomes more important. And if you put a microphone on the world and you put headphones on and you turn up the world, you yourself seem to shrink and the world around you seems to get larger and bigger. In an interview I once read with a field recording artist, she said she felt like an ant in a whole new world to discover. And I must say, this is quite the truth. You should try it sometime. Just put a microphone on something and turn the world up louder. When I started researching active listening, I found a biologist by the name of Gordon Hampton, and he already listens to the world now for 45 years. And he is a biologist, but he's also a self-titled acoustic ecologist. And that means that he uses sound to investigate the world, but also to protect the world. And before going into that deeper, I would like to take you to one of my favorite places that Gordon has recorded, the sea. I love how this sample sounds like the sea, but it also, to my ears, sounds like 1,000 noise oscillators falling over each other. So that's what I started to do. I started recreating this sound, and I came to almost frightening similarity with my own production. So in a conversation with him, I told him about my process, and I called him a conservator. And he said, I am no conservator, I am a protector. My sound is activistic. My sound is activistic. Yay. And he said, like, why are you calling me a conservator? I record the places that I record to protect them. I want other people to want to protect them. And I found that an interesting thing, and we started working together on this artificial coastline. This thing is a bit shitty. And by the name of Shore. And it was a coastline which slowly transformed sounds of Gordon Hampton to my noise sounds. And with this work, we tried to question if you should use sound to conserve, to protect, or to recreate nature. And in another work I made, this synthesization of nature also has a big role. It is this work called Einder. It is a gigantic 30-meter long piece of fabric that is able to simulate a vertical water surface. And while the idea behind the work was the synthesization of nature, we wanted to synthesize water. When we made it, we found it quite poetic that we humans always try to emulate nature in a way in art, and now we made something that we can control, but only to a certain extent. So this work really questions the how do you say it? It really questions surrender and control. That is what I wanted to say. Now, to finish, I want to take you back to another childhood memory of mine. Always visiting the coasts of Holland and being fascinated by these beacons and lights that were on the shore. These blinking lights and these lighthouses always gave me a sense of security, of groundedness. And when I started researching these lighthouses, I found a story about a lighthouse on Faros, which is an island in front of the coast of Egypt. And this lighthouse supposedly burned for 1,500 years non-stop for 4 different empires. And even though this story may not be true, I find it fascinating how people constantly try to shape the world around them into something they can understand with these things as filters or as notifications. And these lighthouses seem to sort of, with their presence, take us away from nature a bit. Lighthouses also have something lonely to them, and we as humankind live with such devastating questions about loneliness and meaning, and these lighthouses we put on coasts sometimes, to me, seem like these silent witnesses to this loneliness. But they also seem to bring some kind of relief. So that is why last year, in 2020, I decided to give Amsterdam its own beacon at the end of the city. Something to hold on to, but also something that in a poetic way can remind us of our collective loneliness and that we are all not alone in this loneliness. While the work was presented at the edge of the city last year, at the NDSM Docklands, it re-entered this year at the Edam Tower. So there you have it, a whole story boiling down to a single, very bright, repetitive light. An experience turned into meaning, and a meaning that can sort of trigger something else for everyone that experiences it. For me, it can be a childhood memory. For you, it can be your father, or it can be just the moment that you are in at that time. So here we are, in a new now than 17 minutes ago. And I would like to invite you to take this experience we shared and maybe try to look deep into what you're doing, to try to hold on to your stories, and to try to take time to groom and nurture them. Thank you.